Hey, Dustin, let's talk about growth mindset. This seems to be a hot topic for you. What does it mean to you?
Hey, good morning, Brian. Yeah, I think several years ago, I just started thinking a lot more about mindset and how that affected business people in general and specifically salespeople. So I've kind of came to the conclusion that I think mindset is more than half the battle with sales and everything that's going on. And years ago, I started reading a book called Mindset by a lady named Carol Dweck, and it's really just talking about fixed versus growth mindset. And it's a lot of stuff you wouldn't even think about growing up and in business. And it just was really relatable to me. And I've tried to embrace that growth mindset and stay away from the fixed mindset. Easier said than done. I mean, it's literally a daily thing that I try to tackle and remind myself, but it's helped me a lot with my career. And I've seen most successful salespeople that I've spoken with or that I know tend to have more of that growth mindset versus a fixed mindset.
Yeah. How did it affect you?
Yeah, I think at certain points I was maybe potentially more of a fixed mindset. Like earlier on in my career, would I think potentially blame a lot of other people for my issues, like not getting a promotion or not closing a deal. And sometimes would have excuses of why that happened or pointing fingers elsewhere. I also I've definitely gotten much better about this, but I used to maybe not take feedback as well as I could have. Maybe more personal attack on me, like, oh,
Yeah.
that's why I'm not getting promoted because this person doesn't like me and they're giving me all this feedback. But then looking back now, it's like I wasn't necessarily looking at it the right way. So things like that help me kind of change to more of a growth mindset where I'm more open to feedback, where I'm trying not to blame other people for my issues and kind of being more accountable, I think.
Yeah, because I think growth mindset requires people to be proactive. I think the default is a fixed mindset because I think in the two cases you gave, your feelings trumped you were now analyzing it. You felt attacked. You felt, uh, that naturally we want to blame somebody else because if we don't, we have to own it. And that's
Mm-hmm.
painful, at least at first.
It is. It is. Yeah. I mean, when you think about fixed, if you want to dive a little bit deeper, I think it's like, you think that your life is where it's going to be and there's nothing you can do to change it. Everything's unfair and you blame everybody else. There's nothing you can do about it to change your path. So it's like you think everything is just that's how it is. And then if you have something bad happen, you typically blame other people when you're in that fixed mindset kind of mentality. So yeah, I mean, I've tried to get away from that, or if I see myself starting to do that, like I recognize it and try to get out of that. So yeah, it's a constant thing I'm working on, but I think it's probably one of the biggest differentiators of how I continue to do better in sales, and then what I'm doing now is like kind of an entrepreneur. So
Yeah, because I think feelings are not facts. And I think today people are making the mistake of, oh, you have a feeling and that's valid and we should just nurture that. And it's like, well, no, you have all kinds of feelings. You get scared, you get depressed, you get anxious, but it's just a signal. It's our subconscious saying, hey, look out, this might be dangerous. Doesn't mean it is, doesn't mean it has a limit or it's in the way. It's just a signal because our subconscious mind just wants to keep us alive. It doesn't worry about our 401k and our retirement or even tomorrow. It cares about right now. And when we hear, oh, you didn't ask this question, or you missed this opportunity to close, or I think you walked over their conversation, that's not a personal attack. That's your performance in that conversation. And that is not an attack. That's hopefully help.
exactly, and that's how you have to look at it. I mean, if you want to improve and get better, you have to take that feedback and try to make some tweaks as you go. So you're going to have challenges along the way. You're going to get pushed a little bit, but if you don't try to get better and tweak some things, then you're going to keep repeating the same mistakes or keep having the same issues. So I think you have to embrace the challenges and the feedback, and then want other people to do well. Another thing with it too is like, and this is debatable because everyone's territory is a little bit different, but I used to sometimes if you're in those territories, they keep splitting things up. You're like, man, I can't do this because that other territory and this other rep, and like you're battling in the same. Sometimes these big enterprise accounts are so big that they're like split up between multiple reps. So I used to kind of blame the fact that I was split up in so many different areas and there's all these other people I was competing with within the same account. But the reality is, I think most of the time you should kind of have this abundance mentality, which kind of goes with growth mindset, where I can have my cake and you can eat it too. Like we can all be successful together. Like your success, Brian, doesn't have any impact on me being successful. Like you should kind of cheer other people on versus be like upset with somebody else's success. And that's another thing too that kind of goes hand in hand with growth mindset, is like this, I think abundance mentality is what people call it, where everyone can be successful and keep flourishing together. You don't have to worry about other people doing well. You should focus on yourself, right?
Yeah. And that can, that is a good mindset to have, as long as you focus on that competitor, because like when you're competing for a deal, you both don't win.
Yep.
But also, you can't be looking at other people all the time unless it inspires you. And I've wrestled with this all the time. And the bad part is it can depress me when I see a competitor have success, but it also inspires me to drive and work harder. So I got to like balance the depression and the drive at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. And then there's obviously a fine line with like direct competitors and things of that nature. You don't want to be too friendly probably in that situation, but it's more just kind of like not necessarily sales thing, but just life in general. Like if you're constantly worried about what other people are doing and their success or failure, then it's probably not going to bode as well for you versus just focusing on yourself and improving your own mindset or whatever it may be.
Because the only thing that's worse than the fixed mindset is the victim mindset, which is kind of taking the fixed mindset and, wrapping yourself around the axle. I mean, how many reps do you say, well, if I was only older, or if I was only this gender or this race or this background or this degree? And you're like, I don't think that's the real issue. I think
Yeah.
I think you can
Yeah.
put all those things, and there's a little bit of truth in all of them. Yeah, the degree or whatever could have helped, but here you are. How are you doing? Does anybody on the customer side ask for your degree? Has that ever happened? You know, thank you for coming in today. Now tell me where you went to school. No one cares. It's what you're doing, and I think that's what democratizes sales for everybody. Is the customer doesn't care. It's what are you going to do for them?
Exactly. And with the victim's mentality, it's also like nobody cares about your problems. I mean, the reality is like all these things. I mean, literally, you can list all this stuff out, and some of it may be true. Like, I mean, some people get some bad
Sure.
circumstances, bad situations. Like, obviously, like I think everyone recognizes that, but like the reality is nobody cares, right? If you're in front of a customer, it's like they don't want to hear all your excuses. They want to hear how you can help them. So
Yeah.
it's easy to get sucked in. I mean, I can't even remember how many times I've seen that happen with like salespeople that I've been working with or myself at certain times where you just kind of get that victim's mentality, but no one cares. I mean, you just got to kind of power through it and figure it out and focus on the customer and helping them because they don't care all the work that went on behind it or whatever you had to go through. It's just make it happen for them.
Yeah, because I've been in sales long enough and had friends that I remember when they said, "Oh, it's because I'm too young." Now they're saying it's all because I'm too old, and it's like, when were you just right? When did that happen? What year was that? Because I mean, the switch just went, or I didn't hear it for a couple of years, and now I hear it's too old, and it's like, how do they know how? And they tell me that's why they're not hiring me. And I go, well, they haven't met you. How do they know how old you are? Well, the date I graduated from college on my degree. And I go, well, take it off. It's a resume, not a deposition, you know? And they still like wrap themselves around that axle. And it's like, that's not the reason. And until you look at the real reason, how can you fix it? You
Yep.
just sit there and rationalize that's the reason. And, which turns into a false belief. And you're the only one that believes it. And I always used to say, well, you built the cage, you walked into it, you closed the cage door, you have the key, and you locked it. And you're the only one that can unlock it. And people are like, well, and they'll still run into it. And yes, you're older than most reps. So that may come up. So maybe you have to appear younger, lose some weight, learn technology. And he's the same guy. If I brought up SaaS to him, he goes, what's SaaS? He didn't know what SaaS meant. And it's like, well, you might want to refresh some of those acronyms that you know or don't know. Because the world changes. You better keep up. The other thing about fixed mindset, and this is on the management side, when people say, oh, sales, you're either born a salesperson or you're not. And I'm like, cut it out. What, that little baby came out with a cold call, a phone in its hand and some email scripts that it was working on and its daytimer. Cut it. Yes, some people are born more socially talented or extroverts where they enjoy people more. But does it mean you can't learn it?
Exactly. And that's, I think, the growth mindset. You're willing to be like a lifelong learner. You're willing to take new challenges. You're willing to do hard things and kind of change your path. But to your point, yeah, that whole cliche about you were born this or born that. I mean, it doesn't, of course, there's going to be some people like
Right.
NBA or NFL athletes, like, yeah, they have a freak athletic ability that most people don't have. But there's also people that have a good athletic ability that work really hard and they end up in the NFL or NBA too. So it's the same thing with sales. I mean, it's definitely not for everybody, that's for sure. But saying you were born with it or born without it, that's a little bit of a stretch for sure.
Yeah, because I don't know if you remember Danny Ainge on the Celtics. He was the
Yeah.
shortest guy in the NBA. He was like 6'2". So when you think who was the guy from Africa who was like 7'2" or something?
Oh, you got like
Balls.
Dikembe Mutombo or
Right.
yeah, or
Yeah.
somebody like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Those people are born with the predisposition to be good at basketball, right? If you're 7'2", you've got a your likelihood of being able to be good at basketball is much higher than 6'2" or 5'2". But that doesn't mean you can't be good at basketball. You may not be an NBA player. And when I hear, and I heard it yesterday in an interview, oh, you either have it or you don't have it. And it's like, you can learn it, can't you? I mean, did you ever feel like you were good at public speaking?
That's a great one. No, I remember coming out of college, like going out of college, going into sales, and like, I mean, that's like some of the scariest stuff you can do, like being in front of customers or presenting and like even
Getting,
20 people or something. I mean, that's like you don't really do that in college, or you shy away from it. Most people do because it's like the number one fear of people. So yeah, and then over the years, you just get used to it, and it's like normal now. But like back at the beginning, that's like terribly scary and like really hard to do. But it just
yeah,
takes time. It takes practice. You got to put yourself in those positions. The other thing with the fixed is like you typically shy away from that type of stuff. So you don't challenge yourself. You don't put yourself in that position. So you end up not getting better. You stay with the status quo. Whereas if you're more growth, you're willing to try that stuff. And I think that's why a lot of salespeople that are doing well probably have a growth mindset because they keep pushing themselves. Even when things are going well, they're trying new things or have a coach, they have mentors, like they're continuously getting better.
yeah. Because in college, I had to give a presentation. So once, and I got to tell you, it was the most nervous, awkward, terrible presentation. And I remember even getting into my car after I had done it and just being like sweating and just noticing that I was just soaked. And because that was, they say it's next to death. And if you look from a hierarchical or a historical standpoint, it is because if you fail, you're being ostracized outside the tribe, shunned. And so people don't speak up. They don't want to be judged. And I remember it early in my career thinking, well, I have a better idea than that, but I didn't bring it up because I didn't want to be judged. And then I started to realize if I don't bring it up, no one's reading my mind. No one, hey, Brian, you got a better idea? No one cared until you bring it up. It's like, hey, how about this? And all of a sudden people are like, yeah, that would work better. And you start to get the reward. And in sales, if you don't exert yourself, you're not going to get much. Prospects, they're not looking for us, right? They've got Google
Yeah.
nowadays. So if we don't insert ourselves into that process, no one else is going to do that. People will ask questions. Yeah, send me a quote and then forget about it. The onus is 100% on us today.
No, you're right. And that's a great example. I mean, I was just thinking like growing up in classes where you're like scared to say anything, like what you're talking about. It's like you get that pit in your stomach. Like that's like can be terrifying for people because I remember it myself because I was more of an introvert growing up. So, and it's the same thing in sales. Like if you don't push the envelope a little bit, if you don't try to be different, if you don't ask those questions when everyone else is scared to, I mean, it's going to be tough to be really successful, especially these days where it's like you said, it's so competitive. There's so much technology that people can access. People are trying to get away from sales reps and not talk to them probably in general. So it's like if you don't take advantage of that and be different and push it a little bit, then and a lot of that comes with confidence and like where your mind's at, like thinking that I think we had another conversation about imposter syndrome. So it's like if you think you shouldn't be in that meeting or you're too scared to talk, it's like it's going to be tough to be really successful.
And how about like IQ? A lot of people believe you're born with a certain IQ and you can practice and train and learn and take classes, but that solid intelligence quotient is never, it's fixed. I'm like, how can that be true? Right? You can study anything. If you give a test to test your IQ, can't you study the elements of the test? And I remember taking the test as kids, and it's like, well, I've never seen this before. How could I be good at this? And if I'm bad at it today, does that matter tomorrow? Right? If I learn how to do it.
That's a good one. Yeah, that book I read too. A lot of it's about education, and she was saying that just because you're really school smart doesn't always translate to being successful in business or sales, whatever it may be, whatever success is, whatever your definition is. And a lot of that, again, went back to mindset because even if you're really smart, had a really high IQ, a lot of those people never wanted to get below an A on a test or a course. So they would not stretch themselves or take all these different classes. They would stay with the stuff that they knew they were good at. And because they didn't want to fail. They didn't want to get a B or whatever. So they would never challenge themselves outside of like the stuff that they were really good at. Whereas the people that, let's say they got a C on a class, they would seek advice, they would seek help, they would try to go talk to the teacher, like how can I get better and improve? And then if somebody in the other mindset would get a C, they would like freak out and blame everybody else and not try to get better. So I don't know about the IQ exactly, but I do know that a lot of times just because you are school smart and in that way, it doesn't mean you're always going to translate to successful in sales for sure. So I think you have to just continuously be open to change and open to feedback as well. So
Yeah. And let's think about who gets into sales. Because if, let's say you go to a great school and you study a great topic and you come out, let's say software engineering, what's the likelihood you go into sales? You go and you become a programmer, developer, and you'll get into sales if you find, well, wait a second, like I did, salespeople making 3 times as much as me and working half as much. I'm no math major, but I can figure out that's a better lifestyle.
mm-hmm.
And I said, I can learn the other stuff. I can buy a suit. I can figure out how to stand up in front of people, entertain them for an hour, transfer some information to them. And I did. It wasn't easy. Nobody really helped me much because everyone was like, we'll let him try it for a while. And then he'll go back to doing his demos. So it is on us. I think too many people today, they got helped all along, and now they think their manager is going to help them. And hopefully they do. But a lot of managers have a sink or swim mentality, and we're the swimmer.
Yeah, it's definitely on you as a salesperson, especially in commission sales. I mean, you got to be kind of eating what you kill type thing. And same thing. I mean, I thought I was going to be in marketing, and I ended up in sales. So I think a lot of times people end up in sales and they're not even like seeking it out.
No.
Not everyone really understands how great of a lifestyle it can be, being a successful salesperson. And like you were talking about, like not, I mean, of course you're gonna have some times where you work quite a bit, but like you can make your own schedule, you can work remote, you can probably not putting in 70 or 80 hours a week most of the time, depending on what you're doing. So people don't quite understand that. But yeah, it's not for the faint of heart too. I mean, it's not like anyone's, it's not very structured, right? So you have to kind of figure it out on your own. You have to be doing things yourself. You have to kind of be a salespreneur, which I know we've talked about. So, but it can be a great lifestyle that people don't even know about in some cases.
So, I mean, after you read the book, how do you process this every day? How do you build it into your routine, the growth mindset?
Yeah, I mean, it's goes back to probably a little bit of my morning routine, and then I think also just continuously getting feedback and having coaches. So at some point, like 4 or 5 years ago, I started hiring coaches paid, and then sometimes I'd have mentors within the company. But like continuously investing in that, I think has helped me because you're constantly getting feedback and like going down that path to get better. So the coaches and mentors for sure. And then when I do like more specific granular, like my morning routine, part of that is like these empowering statements and things I'll say out loud where, for example, I had a couple surgeries this past year, and it's easy like to feel sorry for yourself and just blame the doctor, whatever the situation is. And it constant, like daily, I remind myself, like, stop feeling sorry for yourself, focus on the path, not the obstacle. All these challenges brought me to where I'm at now in my new business. So like I just say these things to myself because like literally that's a great example. Actually, the surgery thing is like you can easily fall into this trap with like just wanting to get pampered, feeling sorry for yourself, like blaming other people, like blah blah blah. So I'll just like say these things in the morning to remind myself not to do that, because don't get me wrong, I'll slip up and think that stuff sometimes, but then if I quickly just look at these, literally have like sticky notes and things like that all around to constantly remind myself. So yeah, I'd say part of my morning routine for sure. And then just the continuous coaching and mentoring, I think helps too, because you're always getting better and getting feedback. So
Yeah, I think having other people, either a peer or somebody maybe 5 years ahead of you, I think is really good. And I always thought that we should have designated drivers for life.
yep.
It's like when you go out to party, instead of trying to like, oh, I'll keep it to 2 drinks or something, have like the person who's completely sober, 0 drinks, they take care of the transportation. And if they say, hey, you're a little out of hand, you listen to them because they're completely straight the whole night. But think about that from a life standpoint. Hey, should I be, taking this much time to recover from my surgery, or I'm really feeling like it's messed up, it hurts. Feelings that are currently valid, but not in the long term. Your shoulder's not going to hurt in a year, right? It's going to heal. It's going to get better. You're going to get stronger. And sales, you're not going to lose every deal. You're going to win some. You're going to lose some. Here's how to keep your mind more at an even keeled instead of a roller coaster. Somebody else can help you with that because they're not going through it. My shoulder doesn't hurt. So I think it's easy for me to say your shoulder's going to get better.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing with somebody else who's been through sales, or that, if they've had bad quarters or they've had bad managers or a bad year, and this is how they got through it.
Yeah, it's a great idea. And I like that, being more of like a peer, maybe someone a few years ahead of you versus like somebody like real far ahead. And because a lot of times, unfortunately, in your work setting, you don't talk about a lot of that stuff, like what, why these deals went bad or what all these issues going on. So if you have a peer within the company or just a friend in the same industry, that's a great one for sure. But yeah, it's a daily thing for me. I mean, I continuously remind myself, and the more it's like the kind of the habit stuff too, like getting 1% better every day, trying to just remind yourself, and eventually it just becomes like kind of more of where you're at. And I mean, I think growing up too, you can see a lot of people can probably see where some of that fixed stuff came from growing up. So you have to kind of just constantly improve and surround yourself with people that are in that type of mindset too. That's another one I like to do, is just be around people that are more in the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset. Cause then it's just like, man, I have a hard time even being around people like that after like focusing on it so much, because it's just can kind of wear you down and drag you down. So I limit those interactions as much as possible. I still, talk with those folks and it's all good, but I try to surround myself with more of the growth people versus the fixed.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because if you're not somebody who's got a strong mindset, you'll kind of sink to their level instead of them rising to yours.
Mm-hmm.
The people in my life who do have that mindset, I use as kind of anti-mentors. It's like, if you don't watch it, you could just turn into this person, and you
It's
do
a good,
not want to turn into this person. And I hear
yeah.
it all the time. There's always a reason that they don't have control over, that things didn't work out. And it's like, well, you don't have control over that. Let's focus on what you do have control over. And you hear, oh, I'm not this, I'm not that. And it's like, you may not be today, but you could be. You could work on it. And does it really take that much? Instead of just saying, no, that's not me. I'm not a people person. I'm not this, or I'm not that. It's like, okay, today you're not.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter the age either. It made me think of my mom. She's like a little over 65, and she's never like been big on like working out or whatever. And I've like talked to her recently, like, maybe you could try some stuff out. And eventually, like, she took a shot and she didn't like going to the gyms because she didn't feel comfortable there. So she wanted to do a virtual trainer. But I mean, she's like 65, hasn't been doing stuff like that for 30 plus years, and started doing it this year and like loves it, does it twice a week now. And she's all about it. So, I mean, it doesn't really matter your age or where you're at either, or whatever sales job you're trying to get. Like, it's, again, that's like a mindset thing. You're like, oh, I'm too old to do this, or I'm too young to do that, or I don't fit in. It's like, you can change it whenever you want to. You just have to like focus the right way, and then have people around you too that will help probably. So